Okay, I think we may be streaming. Yep,
Ooh.
yep, it's saying streaming. Let me check if oh my gosh. Hey everybody. Okay, it looks like let me know if you are hey everybody, let me know if you're out there. We are on episode 72 of the Lost and Found bin. And we had a little glitch from OBS right at the beginning here. It's saying that we're recording, but it has 0 watching. So I I hope we're recording. So Chick, I will ask Buster if he is out there, if he could reply and let me know if we're actually live. So it's saying we are live. And it's looking like we're live. So if Buster could let me know if he can hear us. Let's see here. Yes, yeah, can you hear us? But yeah, settings, output, streaming, encoder 264. We did that. Can you hear us, Buster? Let him know that we did that. Settings, streaming, output. Yes. Okay, good. And you can hear us? Live and working. Excellent. Okay, cool. It's just the weird thing is that it's not showing. It's showing 0 for the stats. Oh, I'm sorry. It has 15 folks watching. All right, everybody. For this very rocky start, we usually start very smooth. However, that's actually not the case in the last couple weeks trying this new OBS product that YouTube has forced us to go to. So, putting that aside, I just want to thank everybody for episode 72 to the Lost and Found bin. Up, look at that. Everybody has showed up. You are live. Kyle Stroud, thank you so much. Lanessa, Mike, everybody, thank you so much. Rob, wonderful Jim, everybody. If I didn't call you out, you know I'm thinking of you, and thank you so much because I see the usual characters here. All right, Chick. I normally I would say I don't know where to begin because this week has been so massive and it was so powerful and there was so much going on. I want to say that it started with that Schumann. It wasn't a Schumann block, more like a Schumann reset of reality. What do you think?
It was massive. There's been a lot of geo changes. There's been some historical changes. There's all kinds of things going on, and it seemed to be with that latest the Schumann resonance blast that you tweeted out.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing ever since that tweet. I've been seeing changes.
It's insanity. And obviously up on the screen here from the Navy Times, what we have is it is the big story of probably the year, if not the century, or in all of history so far, is that the U.S. Navy they have come out and they have officially confirmed that the video from To the Stars Academy is authentic. UAP slash UFOs do exist. They are real. And people that want to nitpick say, well, that doesn't mean that ETs are real. So then what we're going to assume then is that this vibrational anomaly or craft or whatever has nothing alive as we know it or as we human beings think of something alive inside of it. And that it just is sort of is. Or maybe ETs and the craft are one, which I think actually, I'm not being snarky about that. That is actually plausible. Um, I've known for the longest time that interdimensional travel is completely possible. Again, if you check the Gateway document and the documents that we're talking about on Patreon, none of this is far fetched. And the fact that the Navy's come out and made it official, it makes it much more hard for the skeptics to put this in the kook bin. What do you think, Chick?
I think that it's getting more and more difficult. Like we were just talking about earlier before we went on air, people are now going to the point of saying, oh, well, maybe everything is a psyop because they've just run out of possibilities or things to, to find fault with or to say, oh, no, it's not happening.
I think that's a great point because at this point now to keep saying it's just a psyop, it's just a psyop, it's just a psyop. I think at this point it's really kind of like the lazy answer is the way that I feel. You're just tired of fighting what is happening. And as Miachio Kaku said this week, we've reached the turning point. And he said it really well, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, is the turning point is the burden of proof now that we aren't alone is actually on the government. It's on the skeptics. It's no longer on the people that are actually making the claims themselves. And I liked the way that he actually put that, and I think it was deserving of a mention on the show here because he is no slouch when it comes to these kinds of things. And if I remember, he was kind of positive about the UFO thing in terms of him being kind of yeah, not in the totally negative camp, but he wasn't exactly a fan. But for him to come out with a statement like that and say that, this is real and it's happening and it's a fact. We are not alone. I think we've reached that, as he says, we've reached a turning point here. So a lot of big things in the UFO world, which obviously spills over into the Mandela Effect world. It spills over into Schumann, into New Age, Christianity, spills over anything spiritual, anything having to do with science, anything having to do with philosophy. This probably spills over into intelligence. It spills over into economics. The ramifications are unending when it comes to this chick.
I just I would love to see like a response, and I think like the closest thing we're getting is I've been seeing like a lot of reporting on the Area 51 people.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're all there, like we're gonna storm Area 51, but they're ignoring this news story. So like I don't see anybody getting on their YouTube account and saying, "Well, this is happening." Maybe there's no, why think that everything is going on behind the fences of Area 51 when things are going on right where you are, just above you.
And the timing of Area 51 is interesting. We've got now the Navy coming out this week and saying that UFOs or UAP UFOs are in fact real. We've got, I wouldn't say skeptical figures, but figures that were at least on the fence, like Miyachu Kaku saying, I don't know. I mean, it's a possibility. There are Goldilocks planets out there. For the Navy to come out and then, fence sitters or outright skeptics to say that we've reached that turning point. I think Area 51, if you want to think something was a psyop, I think perhaps that was meant to be the psyop, the distraction. And it just didn't work because my understanding, only a couple dozen people actually bothered to show up. So, oh well.
Yes, it did seem to be a pretty good distraction because it was able to divert, and I know it wasn't the intention of people, but it was able to divert away and say, oh, look, the alien people are going to go to Area 51, and then everyone's concentrating on that instead of this footage here that we're seeing from these various, some of them very big news outlets, mainstream news outlets, where you can see right here that there's actual footage of actual things going on. The Navy's confirming, like, yeah, this is not our stuff. This is not some other country that we're aware of. We're not sure, we know it's an unknown phenomena. We know it's not any of the militaries that we are used to dealing with. And it's huge for them to admit that.
Oh, it's massive. One, you have for the Navy, they have to admit that they cannot 100% protect American skies. They can't protect American oceans. They can't protect the American people end to end. And if the fact that the U.S. The Pentagon budget is 40 times larger than the next country, and if you were to take the next 5 countries after the U.S., they would drown in the budget that the American taxpayer foots for the military machine that is the U.S. war machine. I would be angry if it was something other than extraterrestrial. But given the fact that other nations, such as our leading competitors, such as China and Russia, RT is reporting on it. They're not saying anything about it. I've looked around. No one else has brought anything to me saying otherwise. Certainly, if someone, it's been many, many months this has been coming out. If this is Russian or Chinese technology, there's been no evidence of it being so. Another thing too is the way in which they talk about the way that it can drop in milliseconds and take hard left and right turns that would, one, liquefy people. Also, two, like I said, with the budget and the amount of minds that are that the U.S. siphons, they siphon the smartest people from around the world through really big, contracts and all those things to work at the Pentagon. So it's kind of hard to keep up with that kind of military machine. So I don't want to get all political and all that, but if you were to take probably a portion of that and reinvest it elsewhere, perhaps, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but the point being is that I think it's interdimensional. I think it's coming to light. I think from many, many months ago when I had my contact tell me this was going to keep ramping up, and this is part of that. I think this is still part of that. I need to talk to my contact and find out what's what. I need to find out if is this still part of it? Is this ongoing? I have a lot of questions about this. So I know a lot of people, the default switch seems to be it's a psyop. But that's getting to the point now that it's just kind of the lazy default. There's a lot on YouTube. There's a lot of narratives out there. There's about a handful of narratives out there, and they're kind of well-worn paths that we've all heard. It's either the we've got the classical Illuminati path. We've got there's just a million different groups that people want to blame. And if you really want to think outside the box and be a free thinker, you have to start getting away from these well-worn narratives and start thinking for yourself in new kinds of ways. And I think because we were able to do that here, also with a lot of people in the chat helping us out in new ways, we were able to come across things like Gateway, and we were able to present those kinds of things to our listeners. So I would like to think that, particularly our core listeners that come back week after week, that we have probably the smartest group of people on YouTube, if not the entire internet. But I'm rambling at this point, and I'm kind of going on. So sorry.
No, no, that's. I think that I'm just kind of baffled as to why there doesn't seem to be a more like organized response, like from officials. It seems to be almost like people are kind of scattered, or they're kind of trying to pretend that nothing is happening, or it's just a very weird, like lackluster, like void of a response. Like I would imagine, as soon as this kind of story had broken out, there would be all kinds of emergency meetings, and there'd be meetings, all over Europe and Asia, and everyone would be meeting each other, flying everywhere to discuss everything and figure out what to do. But there doesn't really seem to be any kind of, dare I say, realistic response to what's going on. It almost seems to be, well, maybe if we ignore it, it'll just not happen.
Yeah, I think that's what they want. They want there to be no organized response. I think they're getting what they want, is that folks like us in these small corners of the internet or YouTube to talk about this and to read the headlines that this is from the Navy Times, but it doesn't matter if it's the Navy Times or the New York Times. They're all saying the same thing. They don't want the general public to care or talk about it. And as usual, the general public is acquiescing and doing exactly that. They're ignoring it. And it's happening. It goes on and on and on. But that's all right. We'll keep going with it, and that's fine. And I'm not going to let it completely dominate the entire conversation because there's so much going on. Now, you found something that was I don't know what to make of it. It's weird, and it's disturbing, and it harkens to things about the Mandela effect and about the quantum understanding of the multi-worlds theories, and the idea of shifting and clicking out, and the idea of us understanding a small band of the electromagnetic spectrum, the idea of all of these seemingly exotic scientific and philosophic, corners of academia that really don't talk about things like this very often. But suddenly, these kinds of things come to light like this, like we're seeing here in this Fox article. You found this. This was sort of your champion here. It kind of freaked me out and bothered me a little bit. What's up with these underground continents? What does it mean to the shape of the Earth, to this realm? I've always said. I don't. What's up, chick? I don't know what's happening here.
So the Fox News article is kind of an overview, and then there was another article too that has more detail in it, but they're basically saying the same thing. And it's a very strange. Like when I started to read, the other article here from Extreme Tech is like the most Orion article I've ever seen. And I'll read out a snippet so you can get what I'm saying. I'm just going to put the link in the chat in case anybody wants to read along with me.
I'll add it
There
to
we
the.
go.
I'll also add. I'll also add it here real quick if I can. While you're talking, I'll try to put it up on the screen. But please, by all means, go for it.
For sure. Okay, so we have a unique, we people here, you guys among the listeners who have information that almost nobody else has because of your travels. We can actually decode this in a way that even the people writing it weren't able to. So that's quite a advantage to have. So this article is called "There's a Lost Continent 1,000 miles under Europe." And it begins by going into, how people would talk. Actually, it goes into the first sentence, so I'll just go there. Lost continents have always fascinated people, from fictional lands like Mu and Atlantis to actual lost lands and microcontinents like Zealandia. So there's, and immediately
Mm-hmm.
gets Orion right there, where they start talking about fictional continents that are real now. Um, and Doggerland, which is a really deep cut of fictional lands. So Doggerland was when France and the UK and Ireland were like one solid thing. And then that mysteriously disappeared, except it left Ireland, the UK, and France. So their explanation for basically how the effect change, like geoshifts happen, is that they think the tectonic plates crumple underneath and mysteriously eat parts of countries and parts of tectonic plates, and that's why they just disappear as if they were never there. So their explanation throughout this article is that there are a ton of continents that are underneath the continents that we're walking around on, like many layers of different continents and different worlds going 1,000 miles deep, which is a very interesting explanation for how land appears and disappears and looks like it was never there.
Now, this would help explain why, particularly in the Mediterranean and in some parts of the Caribbean, you'll find statues that are like Romanesque or something that reminds you of the Incas or something or Mayan civilizations, but they're at the bottom of the ocean, particularly like I said, in the seas of the Caribbean and the Mediterranean that are a bit more shallow. So what you're talking about actually gives credence to that, and it would help explain why those things are there, and it would also explain some of the strange anomalies that you find out in Antarctica and elsewhere too. Just these. Look at this picture that they're showing there. It's so like, and where are they coming up with these names? I'm wondering because I guess they would have it in the ancient literature.
Well, that's the thing is that the ancient literature, especially for the supercontinents, only came into, and Gondwana right there is one of their supercontinents. So we had, Pangea and a couple of different variations of Pangea, but in this world, their knowledge of what was before Pangea goes millions of years back. So I just posted in the chat the Wikipedia list of supercontinents, and you'll be absolutely surprised at the names and how far back they go. So they go back, I dare say, like millions of years before Pangea. And because they have all of this information that's like pre-Pangea, they have all these different schematics of what the world looked like and what the countries looked like. But I'm still trying to figure out how they can do that accurately, and why they think that it's logical that tectonic plates are almost like paper, where they can just fold and then unfold. And I suppose one of the most interesting parts of this article was towards the end, where they were talking about how, right here, scientists have been mapping sunken sections of continental crust for years now and have detected remnants of crust that were once on top of the Earth's surface in previous expeditions. There are buried remnants of our own past now locked away far inside the mantle. And what I thought was weird about that sentence is because we know that it's not their past that's locked away, it's actually their future. So as the some of the plates that are underneath under other plates in this current world are actually surface plates in the Sagittarius arm. So what they think is their past is actually the Earth is going to get bigger and bigger and spread out, and the plates that are underneath each other are all going to be at the same level because the Earth is going to get 10,000 miles bigger as it goes towards the edges of the Milky Way. And we only know this because we came the other way. We came from when it was really big, and now we're here to where it's super compressed. And it's really a time traveling strange thing geologically that the people that are native here are going outwards and we're going the opposite direction. We're going inwards towards the center of the Milky Way. And the further we go inwards, the smaller and more compressed it all is.
That is interesting. I think another thing, another way that to potentially think about it would be that each one of those are actually quite alive and quite robust, and the people are actually going about their day like we're doing, and they're seeing us in another article on their side as an extinct civilization. But what it is our sheets of glass or our versions of reality, in the multiverse. And what we're doing is because we've torn the veil so much, or we've thinned it so much, we're actually seeing what Earth would look like in different versions of reality. Perhaps that could be something as another. There's three or four different alternative explanations, and where this greater Adria, that could be right now. It's bustling like you would think of like downtown Manhattan. There's like, on the coastline there, perhaps.
Absolutely. Just like the ghost cities with the wind turbines,
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely bustling. They're just not quite where we are.
Also, too, those photos that people talk about in terms of Tartaria or the Mud Cities, always those pictures are taken and there's no one there on the streets, and these are mega cities, and they have streetcars and electricity and all these other things, and there's no one there. The cities are absolutely empty. It's almost as if the photographer had taken a picture right as the transformation from one version of reality to the next was happening. So what they had was the buildings were there, but the people had already clicked out. So the buildings had yet to morph. These are just ideas that I think of when I see these kinds of anomalies like this.
It's really strange. Like I had a thought the other day about the idea of there's if CERN is a real thing, or if there is some natural anomaly that's going on that's not CERN but CERN's taking credit, or whatever way we want to look at that. It's possible that what's happening is so unprecedented that the Earth isn't actually sure what to do, as in it could be like just bouncing through different times of its own life cycle, like all at the same time, because we're talking fifth dimensionally here,
Mm-hmm.
and that all possibilities are coming within view of other possibilities because when you tear into the fabric of reality, it's not as clean cut as just destroying Earth, as in Earth is maybe perhaps somewhere between being fine and being completely over with, and it's not actually able to reach either destination. So
Mm-hmm.
just everything is playing out in a kind of a wheel of chaos, and it's hard to describe, but it's almost like that. Oh gosh, what was that show called on Netflix? It was like about that scary house that was haunted. I talked about this so many episodes ago that now I've forgotten it. But there was one character anyway, and she used to see this she called her what was it, the bent neck lady. And I know this sounds really off killed her, but it all ties in with she was actually seeing different herself at different points of time, and she
Hmm.
didn't know that she was running into herself at different points of time. She thought it was a ghost, and it's almost that kind of thing with the Earth. Is like it doesn't know quite what's going on. At least that's what I'm seeing because there's so much chaos with what we see from time to time. Like
Mm-hmm.
you'll see Greater Adria like almost come into view and it'll disappear. You'll see Great Tartaria was almost completely coming into view, and then so much talk of it has died down. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's almost like the same phenomena as the UFO thing, where it's almost coming completely into your face, and then for some reason there's a distraction before there's a resolution.
Yeah, and that's really sad that the Mandela effect is not taken more seriously by the broader, because I think the Mandela effect is the there's different conspiracy or fringe thinking, in terms of there is Tartaria, there's mud flood, there's this, there's that, and I think what the mortar that holds all these bricks together would be the Mandela effect, because what it does is it shows, like you're talking about, you have a version of reality that is Tartaria, you have a version of reality that's mud flood, you have a version of reality where the parents were all missing, and you have some kind of reset where all the children were orphans in the early 1900s. There's all of these ideas, and they only make sense if you have the Mandela effect and you couple that with Gateway. And now, particularly, I got to make a shameless plug for our Patreon. We have a document that is talking about how humanity goes from the fifth to the sixth stage, and what happens to reality as it moves, and human beings as a species move, and other species, they move from the fifth to the sixth stage. So I'm not going to go on that too much. I'll stick with the information that most people have. But that's what I think that holds all of this together. You take the Gateway document, you read that, you understand exactly what the Mandela effect is, and then what you talk about. Is all of those versions of what they think the past, the present, and the future is. And Stephanie G, if you're new to the channel, the TV show Fringe, that is very interesting. But what's really interesting about TV shows is that they do two things I always say. One, they inform you, and two, they inoculate you. They inoculate you so your knee jerk response is that, oh, it's that TV show. Well, right, Stephanie, I call it reality. That's funny. That's cool. For most people, it's a knee jerk response. So they say, "Oh, you just saw that on TV. This is just science fiction." So immediately you're inoculated. But second, also too, why it's on television is that it's implanted into your subconscious. It's implanted into your spiritual higher self, so that you immediately know that you're actually helping to make this possible. You're actually helping to inoculate the broader public. So it's twofold why it's really important. And then also too, some people start talking about this like karmic thing where they have to show you what they're actually doing or something like that. But to anyone else, one more thing about my rants who's new here about fiction, all I have to say is Jack Parsons. He was reading comic books about rockets, which didn't exist, and he had such mojo. He pulled from science fiction into this world, and he was able to manifest that, because that's all this is. That's all we're talking about. You see a tank in front of you. You've seen any of those things in front of you. At one point, they were science fiction, and unfortunately, some of the science fiction that's been conjured up in this version of reality, it's not too good for the future. I can tell you that much. So, what do you say, Chick?
Um, I I'm not even sure. Like I said before, like in earlier episodes, I have a very tenuous relationship with even the idea of future right now, because future and past have kind of gone error 404, and we seem to only have the present to deal with. And like I said, the present is, and I hate to be so dramatic with what I'm saying, but I'm just like I can see kind of almost like a struggle within reality. Like it's not sure what on earth is going on. Almost like it's having an allergic reaction, or it's like rolling around trying to get itself back into a sense of solid uh, being or form. And we're not seeing. much solidity with its form because Europe history is just breaking the banks. Different histories are just breaking the banks of each other and just flowing into each other into one big mass stream of consciousness, like one big river. And the more the banks kind of burst, I feel like the less a chance that anything is going to be kept separate anymore, timeline wise. It's kind of like everything going into the one, and that kind of leaves us in a very strange situation where it was very straightforward with linear time. The human life has this many stages, and you better do this, and this. And now it's like, well, does it anymore? Does any what it leads you to deep philosophical questions because you on a holographic scale are just a much smaller version of what's going on with reality itself. And when you see Joan Collins like on TV, like I did yesterday, even though I had seen her die, I think it was twice now, and when you see different people like that, where you're not even sure, did a version of them move on? Did they not die at all? Like, there's so many questions that open up with all this. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, perhaps with Greater Adrian, perhaps with these things that are coming up, is I'm sure there were a lot of massive civilizations that just completely got lost because their language died out. People didn't record them. Their enemies didn't want to record, like, of how successful they were or anything like that. So we could be coming into entirely new histories and entirely new understandings of what life is, what Earth is, what any of these things that are actually going on are. That's why I want to try and stay positive about it. I know we always like try to keep it neutral, but I feel like people are more worried about the spaceships and about the things like that. But I'm just, as I've said before, just because the movies have told you to be worried doesn't mean that you actually have to be. We have to wait and see what is going on and what the intentions are. We already know that different humans are hostile to the whole situation on Earth. It doesn't necessarily mean that whatever is flying around up there even cares about what's going on Earth. We might not be very important in their view.
Yeah, and it, like I've said before, it comes down to two things. It's either going to be love or fear, and like hatred and all that. It's just a subset of fear. There's either love or fear, and I'm going to choose love because it's going to win out. No matter what, it will. And I think that for me, the well-worn narratives of fear that are on YouTube that people have in terms of really popular quote unquote conspiracy channels. I think I think they were important for a time perhaps, but now that we're actually seeing things come into fruition and they're not coming in the way that people keep saying and they're trying desperately to forge them and put them into a box that actually, by the way, I'm showing the Schumann resonance spike on there. And this is what this is about, is that spike. I think that spike has something to do with all of us and the way that we're thinking and the way that we're connected to each other, like roots in a tree. And I think that even though I say those kinds of things about a dissolving reality or whatever it may be, that's not always a negative thing. Things are always constantly changing. Things are always falling apart and things are always rebuilding. It's just a matter of, I think there's some kind of idealistic, setup that's always going to fail where there's going to be a snapshot in time that was idealistic and perfect and everyone wants to retreat back to that and you never can because it didn't exist in the first place. That's first, because it was a fiction, and two, even if there was a version of reality where that happened, that's gone now and we're here together, and that's okay, and that's a great and wonderful thing. Just think of a miracle it is that we even found each other, and the fact that we were able to find the Mandela effect, and we were able to find the Schumann spikes, and able to find the Gateway document, and put this together in some sort of coherent pattern process that we all can understand each other and come together. Do you know how much of a miracle that is? To me, that isn't born of fear, that's born of love, because it's born of an idea of saying that we are in our own kind of strange way. We're our own community. We're our own thing, and that's it.
And I think a lot of us feel, I know I definitely feel like this is our time to speak. And I feel like, you know, there were a lot of things going on in earlier decades, but I feel like a lot of us, when we tried to just join in with the hustle and bustle of, you know, everyday normal things, it wasn't, we weren't fulfilling what we were capable of. And maybe that sounds like a bit too much for people, but I think that we're here and we're doing this because we were the people that were capable of doing it. And perhaps in some crazy way, we were even supposed to be here at this time doing this. And, you know, we're, you know, a lot of us are not the elite or somebody, you know, really rich and important or famous or anything like that. So of course we, in the society that we've been raised in, we would never think, oh, we're supposed to do something special with our lives. But literally this is what's unfolding in front of us. Maybe there's nothing wrong with just people who have come from all over the place, who were told all their lives that they weren't, you know, particularly important or special. It's like reality has shown you the opposite of that. You're literally one of the only people who can see this.
That is amazing, and there is some sort of justice to kind of an unjust world if you have a small band of people, us, and we've come together, and just the fact that we can see this for what it is, and we're able to sort of pull all of this information together and pull all of our energy together. And you're right, we're not particularly as far as I know in the audience, and certainly not me or you, Chick, we're not famous, we're not anything like that. And we're not powerful, and we don't command, armies or people, or I don't storm up and tell Congress this is the way it's going to be or whatever it is. But, and here we are. We're seeing things for what they are. We're interacting with reality, and we're understanding it. I think on a level that a lot of people won't even dare talk about, and what they're left with is oftentimes a sophomoric form of ridicule. And I think a lot of people, they retreat into ridicule, and that at the base of that is it's fear. It's just straight fear. I wouldn't even give it the dignity of calling it hate.
For sure. And there are things that, as we've often discussed before, are ridiculed and thought to be so ridiculous. And then, very, you know, shortly after that, people go, oh, actually, that was obvious. Yeah, we always knew that. I
Yeah.
mean, as a crazy example, the first guy that believed in bacteria and said you should wash your hands before performing an operation, he was a doctor, they had him committed. They said, you're absolutely crazy. That's not true. And now, in the medical world, at least, you know, here, of course, you wash and clean your hands before you would do any medical procedure, even an examination. So often, being the first people, you will get the brunt of everything. You know, when you're the first people to realize something, you're going to get ridiculed, you're going to get hated, and especially people, a lot of people don't like the truth. And if you're coming at them with this really truthful energy that is going to rock the way that they view things, a lot of people will not be welcoming to that. They would much rather if you would be quiet and go away. And I know a lot of people feel that too when we're going around doing our thing and talking truth. People do not want to hear that. They'll even just like off feeling your vibes when you approach them, will try and move away. And I think that that's something that people have probably gotten used to because it's been 2 or 3 years for most people, but it's not something that has ever gone away. And I think that it's important that it doesn't, because it reminds you that you're not just going to fall back into a sleepy life like before. Like, specifically, you need to be paying attention because specifically you are one of the very few people that exist, that have ever existed, that can actually see what's going on with reality. So therefore, your attention and what you're doing is very, very important. And I think that even just paying attention to what's going on is helping.
Oh yeah, look at this spike. I mean, it's right on the screen. It's madness. This is happening, I believe, directly because people like us are paying attention more. I think these spikes, would the spike before that, we would have been like, look at that bar, that's amazing. This spike that happened, in the last 48 hours, I would say, maybe even 24 hours. Look at that thing. That's a beast. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's reality changing right there. And we have to understand, in the weeks coming, there's gonna be fallout from this. There will be, and there will be big changes. And it's always something quirky and weird with these changes. It's always like, huh? And just think about it. The Navy is saying, period, UFOs exist. That's it. That's it. It's done. They're saying it. People are, well, we're waiting for disclosure. And it's really funny if you listen to someone who's really ignorant and they're not actually paying attention to what's going on. They actually still say it. I actually saw that, I think it was last week sometime. They had mentioned it was on some popular news channel, and they were saying, well, that's just with the kooks that believe in UFOs and Bigfoot. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, what you probably just did, you just created Bigfoot, man. You just pulled and then a week later we have the Schumann spike, and watch, pretty soon someone's gonna find Yeti. I'm telling you, they're gonna have Yeti like with like a Coors belt buckle run across the street somewhere in Colorado. I'm telling you, man.
You know what's already happened with Bigfoot in
What?
regards to the effect, which is totally weird, and I wonder if the footage has changed back or if it's still the same.
Mm-hmm.
But the famous footage of the Bigfoot, the Yeti, he
Yeah.
now has huge big boobies.
What? What?
Literally, and that was like a huge effect a while ago there. It's like Bigfoot is female. Bigfoot has like huge big boobs. And I was like, no way. And I watched the footage and I was like, oh my gosh, Bigfoot has huge big boobs. What just happened?
What? No, really? It's changed that
Yes.
much? Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
That was a weird moment there. The humans went crazy that time. That's when the Sistine Chapel changed too, and all kinds of people got boobs there as well. And people were just like, "What is going on with like this boob shift? This is really strange."
I missed the boob shift, man. Oh man, it's a bummer. But I don't know where to go from here. You kind of man, you reset the circuits here, chick. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're.
I know. It's just kind of like, what's going on now? Oh yeah, now that you mentioned Shiva, the bit of Venom did, the opposite happened with the statue of at CERN. The boobs completely disappeared, and it turned into the male version, which is very important because it's like the male version is creation and the female version is destruction. So that was probably one of the most important changes to the CERN statue that I've seen in a long time.
Interesting.
Just on the general, like that's all my information there on the general crossing over between boobs and the Mandela effect. But I feel like that was the important stuff.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm glad you handled that, and I'm gonna I'm gonna say nothing. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do that right now. Um,
I know sometimes the trolling just gets out of control and you just don't know what to do because if you make some bad joke, that'll show up in reality. Like so
that
you got to be really careful.
that's actually a great point, and that's a valid point too. That is, we cannot forget the troll factor of the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect does have, for anyone who's new or doesn't know anything about the Mandela effect, it totally has this weird sense of humor. And it does weird things like that. Like I said, I was bound. Well, obviously I've got to check out Yeti now, but I've talked about Andy Warhol on the moon. I've talked about just the weirdest things that the Mandela effect does, and there's just this it trolls you. It's just weirdness. So I don't know. I don't. And this spike probably will bring back Bigfoot, no doubt, totally. And and not to I'm not laughing at like cryptoids and people who are into cryptos, because for years people laughed at scientists that looked for panda bears. If no Everyone forgets about panda bears. They were a myth literally up until like 90 years ago. And so for like 1,000 years, panda bears were this myth, and people were laughed at, just roundly dismissed because of the panda bear. And sure enough, they turned out to be real.
True. And now it's not even disputed.
And they're cute. And they roll all over the place. And I must admit, second to cat videos, in terms of animals, I watch pandas, particularly the baby pandas that don't know what's going on, and they roll around all over the place like roly polies. So there you go. I do.
I need to find some more roly poly Waka Waka Raven videos
Oh
because I'm
man,
still loving that from last week.
that's awesome. That raven, waka waka. And then, you got to get ones that say really weird stuff. That would be great. I had always heard that Churchill's bird, his it had died recently, like in the last 10 years, and it was like 100 years old. And the bird had the foulest mouth and just the most vulgar. It was the
Oh
most
no.
vulgar, most upsetting bird. And they said it would almost know how to upset you. Like you'd walk in the room, and if it would just like know something about your mom and say horrific things about your family.
What was Churchill saying to that bird?
Right, right. And it was still saying like explicitives about infamous World War II villains that I'm not going to say because of the algorithm, but it would say horrific graphic explicitives about those villains. And the bird would like know your weakness, and just like stare at you while you're cleaning the bird cage up and just say horrific things to you.
That's just terrible.
Hor-
I'm just like picturing like Churchill going on tirades in private and the birds just like soaking it all up and ready to unleash it upon the world.
Me too. And I'm just like, what? Why, man?
I wonder if it's changed in this timeline, but I know in our timeline he was really salty because the royal family thought that he was getting way too much attention and they wanted to bring all the attention back on, on themselves. So they started to downplay him as much as possible and like uninvite him from things and basically he ended up like really really bitter over that. But of course they want all the attention because they're the monarchs. They don't want you to be the hero of the country because that divides where people are looking at, and you don't want that in a monarchy system.
No, you totally don't want that in a monarchy system. However, the reason why there is still a monarchy system is because there was a salty guy who basically just mistrained his parrot to the point of just horror. So, I can accept that. So, I mean, because he was kind of important in the fact that there still is a monarchy. So,
Gosh, and we were just talking before we came on air about how weird history has changed and how weird you feel when you're watching it. You get the I'm not in Kansas anymore feelings. And
yeah.
that is so true at World War II. Like I don't even watch it any World War II things anymore because the more different they get, the more it kind of makes me feel very odd and uncomfortable. But it's still funny that when you watch the British World War II things, they're always like, "Oh, the Americans were just so confused, and they needed us to lead them," and it's so funny. And then when you see the U.S., like TV shows about World War II, you'll see like the U.S. are the heroes and the British are backing them up. Like everyone wants to take all of this credit for themselves. But it's just I wonder how long the story's even gonna last, to be honest, because like I just read the word Doggerland earlier, and that basically if Doggerland comes back into existence, the Nazis can just walk from France to the UK. So that's seriously going to cause some issues if Doggerland does come back. And Doggerland has been making a lot of noise. There's a lot of like maps and things showing up with Doggerland, so I'm just like I never even heard of it where I was from. It wasn't even a thing because the UK and France were so far from each other that there was no connecting tectonic plate that got folded underneath the other plates or whatever their bizarre explanation is.
Yeah, and I'm torn because we did the whole World War II investigation back last year, or actually in January, so about 9-10 months ago. Um, and yeah, Tommy, tell the truth. We talked about Torpedo Alley. If you go back and look at our videos back in January, we found all kinds of other things, such as bombings in California. There were bombings in Oregon, Washington State, Alaska. The British suffered one of the most humiliating defeats in naval warfare in terms of British naval warfare, and they lost. Gosh, what island was that chick that they lost to the Axis powers?
Um,
Singapore. Singapore. They lost to Singapore to Japanese. The Japanese there was the Battle of Darwin now that we found because the Japanese had beaten the Allied forces so badly. I know that other channels are starting to get into World War II. The only thing that I would caution is I noticed and that's something I should have brought up to Buster and you. There's a quantum scientist, and I have the video, and I tweeted it out, and I'll get it to you guys. He was saying the problem with history is it's a lot like quantum. It's a lot like quantum physics. The more you dig, the more it falls apart. And it was almost as if he had taken the words out of our mouths. And it was so amazing to hear that from someone who is into the quantum world. And I felt a bit validated when I heard that, Chick, because that's what you and I were always saying, is that the further if you dig, you realize that history is nothing like they taught, and that it does change sometimes. Yeah, hit that like button, everybody, if you can. Just so everyone knows, the show is coming towards a close. Views are down by 60%. There is no more. We broke the 8,000 mark in terms of subs, but no more subbing. I think they finally changed the algorithm on YouTube. I think the channel now, the only way that the channel will get any kind of promotion is word of mouth from now on. So hopefully you can do that for us. A thumbs up would be really wonderful. You could subscribe if you haven't. Share the video around, because you can see it. We used to get a lot of. Every day we would get anywhere from 10 to 200 subs a day, thousands and thousands of views, and we don't anymore. Everything, the channel has almost screeched to a halt, other than the regulars that come back every week. I think we're caught in that basket with a lot of other independent creators on YouTube. That's part of the Patreon move, is to get us over on our own platform where we can do our own thing. There are some other platforms that are also starting to crack down on some independent creators. So it's let's see, we're getting close to that hour mark here, Chick. We're also, if you would like to check us out on Twitter, I'm at AI_SMQ. Chick, where are you at?
At Chick Effect.
Great. And then Buster is Buster1978. You can check all three of us out. If you have anything you'd like to share or anything like that, let us know. We'll check it out and see what's going on. We're getting close here to winding the show down, and it is sad what's happening here on YouTube, and it's happening to tomorrow. I will be doing the lizard ritual. I didn't do it last week. I have a lot of things changing and going on in my life right now. But tomorrow I will be doing the lizard ritual on Truth Frequency Radio. Go to TFR or truthfrequencyradio.com. Just Google it. And listen. Tomorrow I will be on at 5 o'clock Eastern for an hour. And we will be putting out a new Patreon video pretty soon. And Buster has found more information that's really important and interesting. So we just want to thank everyone that supported the show for being here with us, and we just we really appreciate it. As this thing winds down, Chick, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I feel like that one point I made earlier was kind of messy. I wanted to try and make it make sense one more time before I go. J.H. Armstrong reminded me of the name of the show. It was Hill House, and a lot of it was just like, scary or gross, like kind of shock factor. But the one thing I found interesting in it was, like I said, the girl that was like running into herself at different points in time. And it was almost like because her life was unresolved, she couldn't get out, as in she was just kind of stuck in the time loop of her own life. So her soul couldn't pass on from her death, and she couldn't obviously go out the other way, like from her birth. So she was just kind of roaming around in her own life with an incomplete memory. And that was kind of the model that I was trying to associate, or theorize to associate with what might be happening with reality. Like just what you said there, when the more you dig at quantum physics or at history, the more it all falls apart. It's kind of like, well, perhaps it's because there hasn't been a resolution, so you can't get out the natural way that you should have been able. Like there's no natural resolution if something bad happened to the fabric of reality, so you're just kind of going around in the lifespan that you've lived, kind of around and around and around, and going deeper and deeper into that, and all of it, that all of the things that that entails, including secret histories and continents and things that you were never made aware of because you are in the one time loop. Now you're actually learning everything about the lifespan of the reality you were in. So hopefully that makes way more sense than what I said earlier, because I was trying to attach different concepts together and I was like, this is actually really confusing. I probably need to write this down and make it make sense before I say it. But hopefully some of you kind of understand what I'm saying there, is that we don't have a resolution in the normal way. So this whole process is going to have to come about in its own transformative fashion, and perhaps we'll get totally different results than we would have in the usual way, because I honestly think that reality is headed in a different direction than the direction it's always headed in before.
Yeah, yeah, well said. No, I like that, and I watched the show, and I think you're absolutely right. And as far as I want to address Mr. Laugh, he said, SMQ, if you want to be more popular, you should challenge some skeptic YouTubers to debunk you. I mean, well, first off, you don't understand my philosophy of what I am and who I am and the way that I conduct my life. So there's really, I mean, if they want to debunk me, I'd probably end up agreeing with them. That's one. If they made a good point, that's one. Also, two, I base everything off of these documents, like the gateway document and the other documents that we've presented. We've presented a library of documents, so they can debunk those documents if they want, and if they do, that's really wonderful, and I'll listen to the video. But I don't really debate, because I just that's an ego based and an ego driven thing, and that's something that you do. That's something academics do to sort of stroke themselves and make themselves feel more important and better. And it's something that I can't. I don't have the time or the I don't have the energy to engage in, because
Well, it's a different situation than any other situation too, because someone that's not affected has no idea what you're talking about. So of course
mm-hmm,
they'll say, "Oh, I can say this to debunk you," and they don't understand that, okay, what they said is true in one timeline, but not the other timeline I was in last year, or the one before that, or the other outcome that I've seen from this other thing. It's like having a normal computer argue with a quantum computer. They're
right,
not coming from the same basis, so you can't actually debunk each other because you're not even speaking the same language. And I know that some unaffected people think that we're like cliquey, that we're like a clique. And I've even had someone say to me that we're almost like we're initiated in something and we won't let other people in. And I'm like, it's not that we don't let other people in. It's like either you get it or you don't. And if you get it, you're already in the group. And if you don't get it, then you just don't understand what we're talking about. And there's no way for us to make you affected if you want to be.
right.
We're not able to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And I've heard people debate, and it's exhausting. And really, in the end, neither one ever walk away and go, you made a great point, and you've changed my life. And usually, it's just people get really nasty with each other, and it's a waste of time. So, all right, everybody. So, that's it. We will see you, when we see you. Who knows? Who knows? So. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So, see you later. Bye.
See you soon.